As you're jumping in, please, if you're comfortable, feel free to throw in the chat where you're coming from. I will throw mine in now. Love to see where we're all located today. We've got a couple people coming in, so we'll give it just a couple seconds here. Welcome, welcome. Alrighty. I'm going to jump into just a few housekeeping notes. Thank you all for joining our session today, Assessing the Marketing Essentials, Strategy, Skills, Systems, and Budgets by the wonderful Kate Ledger at ODU. We are going to jump in just a moment, but just a couple of notes for you all. This session will be recorded, so you will have access to this post the conference. So if you are furiously taking notes, not to worry, you will have this in your hands. All attendees, yourself included, are muted and off camera, so no worries if you are doing this on your lunch hour. We cannot see you, and you can certainly enjoy the content from anywhere. While you are able to chat in the Zoom, we do urge you to use the functionality in Hula. We'll be monitoring both, though, for any questions, and we'll hold those to the end. So feel free to engage and interact with us and wherever you're most comfortable. And we'll make sure to hold those questions for the end and make sure to get you answers. If you have any technical challenges or anything that you need to get our attention for, please use the marketing@carnegiehighered.com email. You also can engage with us in the Ask Organizers Anything section of the community board, so whatever you prefer. And finally, we encourage you to be as social as possible throughout the session by using the hashtag #TheConnection, as well as tagging @CarnegieHQ. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Kate Ledger and kick it over to her.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much, Jamie, and thanks to all of you for joining today. I know that 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, but many of you may be joining us during lunch. And if you're anything like me, you're sitting with your lunch while you are trying to work. And so I just appreciate you spending your lunch hour with me today. I'm going to frame this conversation, and I say conversation because I do hope you'll engage in the chat and ask some questions, but I'm going to frame it relative to running today. And so I know that some of you are already annoyed because you're not runners and you don't like running, and your friends who run are super annoying because they talk about it entirely too much. Some of you are pumped because you already got your run in for the day. I'm a retired runner. I had an injury in 2020, so now I'm just a self-identified Peloton addict, but I'm using running because it's a reflection of the work that we do. We're frankly training for these marathons, right? It's the long haul in the higher ed marketing space, and that can come through a series of small runs, right? You've got to build up your endurance to make it to the end, and things get in the way, as life does. I also think it's interesting to frame it this way because if you've ever gone to a race, you see a real variety of runners. You can tell that there are the super prepared runners who have been on their running plan for months and have hit all the things they need to do, and they're ready and raring to go. There are the runners who had hoped to be as prepared, but illness, injury, life, kids, whatever it is, got in the way. And so they showed up, and that is what matters. And then there's the people who show up in jeans and you're like, what the heck? And they end up having a great race. So my point is there's a whole variety of lenses we can use to look at life and look at running. And so just wanted to frame that up for us today. The two lenses that I'm looking through are from my experience at the University of Pittsburgh and my current university, which is Old Dominion University. For the past 20 years, I was at Pitt. It was founded in 1787. It's an urban school with 30,000 students, very few of which are fully online. Pitt's a state-related institution, so they receive about 7% of their budget, which is 150 million, so it's not a small amount from the Commonwealth. And I held 5 different positions at Pitt. So it was always in a marketing role. And then as I was leaving Pitt, I was the interim vice chancellor for communications and marketing. And I really got pulled heavily into communications. And I mean heavily because I know that carries a lot of weight for those of you sitting in that space in higher ed. And that's actually what drove me to look for new roles, in part because I really wanted to focus on the marketing. So I'm super excited to be at Old Dominion University. I'm entirely focused on online enrollment. So that's part of ODU Global. And while our history is short compared to Pitt's, it's actually long in the online space. ODU was delivering education to Navy ships in the 1980s via satellite. Our current enrollment is 6,900, but our goal is to double that enrollment in 5 years. Marketing is really valued at Old Dominion University, and the budget's considerably higher than Pitt's. And I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that, because when you think of the University of Pittsburgh and the size and sort of the scope of the institution versus something like Old Dominion relative to the other schools in Virginia, you might not think that that's the case. But the reality is that the competitive space for online is super hot. And so you need the budget to be able to make that happen. So really excited to be joining ODU. And I'll try to sort of talk through both of these lenses as I'm working through the presentation today. And again, welcome any questions. So as I'm working to really build out some of the basics at ODU Global, it's a young, remember, relatively speaking, organization. I'm reminded almost daily that while we are running this long race, sometimes you've got to stop and just tie your shoes, right? This quote really struck me as related because you've got to start with the necessary. So often I forget the basics, right? When's the last time you looked at your RFI response, or maybe watched a video on a page that hasn't been refreshed in a while, or checked out the thank you page, or checked the 1-800 number to make sure that is 1, accurate, and 2, answered. These seem like really basic things, but you've got to start with the necessary. And the reality is, once you do the necessary, then you're able to really be assured when you go on to what's possible. And there are many things possible, and I'll talk more about that in the presentation. And then suddenly you're able to do the really fun, big idea things. And I think that's truly where the magic happens. So today I'm going to talk about really 4 different areas. The first is our learners. That is what we call our prospective students at ODU Global. Just a flash review, frankly. What do they want? I think we all know this, but I just want to make sure we're coming from the same point of view. I'm going to talk about marketers. I'm going to talk about those 4 areas of strategies, skills, systems, budgets, and then move on to a little bit of AI, because the industry is changing so quickly. There are opportunities for you to roll AI into the work that you're doing, and you may not realize you're doing it already. And finally, just closing sort of on next steps, the conference is called Connections. So we're going to try to keep those connections alive as we head into the rest of the day. So starting with our learners, and frankly, I think most of us here also expect personalization. We personalize our shoes, our phones, our smoothie drinks. I shared this image from the Nike website because it highlights the level of personalization you can do for shoes, right? You can change every aspect of the shoe, the laces, the heel. I mean, I don't know shoe lingo, but it's very doable, it's pricey, and yet it's very popular. And at the New York City store, you can actually custom dye colors and do some engraving, and you would think all of this is out of reach, but in fact, people are willing to pay for this level of personalization. And we want our stuff personalized. We want our stuff fast, right? We want it to load and happen very quickly. And we're all carrying these high-powered computers, frankly, known as our phones, in our pockets with this expectation that all these connections, all these things that we have will help us to be both faster and more targeted in the work that we do. And that is not any different for our learners. Research indicates that 76% of website visitors voice frustration when their websites don't personalize content, and 71% of consumers mentioned that they expect companies to deliver personalized interactions. So what does this look like? I think you all know it's our names, our likes, our dislikes. It's what we've searched or bought prior coming to the site and likely are going to buy again. So The perfect example is the coffee ad that pops up because I'm early in my kitchen making the coffee and running low. And doesn't Amazon know that I need more coffee, and isn't Amazon usually right? So I'm grateful for that level of personalization, honestly, because it really helps me to move throughout my day, again, faster as the speed we are all looking for. Learners also really have a lot to juggle. And I liked this quote from Bart Kaler. It appeared in the Hannon Hill white paper, Navigating the Demographic Enrollment Cliff. Traditional college-age students are also struggling with this, right? So I don't think it's just adult learners, but life, family, having a job, all of these things while also trying to get a college education. And sometimes the competition isn't the school down the street or the school you see in the ad online, but it's truly the bank account and some of the other things that we are dealing with in life. So I wanted to keep this at front of mind as well as we're thinking about our learners, because it's not nearly straight cut as we all think it is. And this just adds to what they are looking for in their college education. Next, I'm going to talk about marketers, and I see 4 different areas in the work that we do: strategies, skills, systems, and budgets. And I'll dive into each of these. So let's start with strategy. Starts with clearly defined goals, and you have an enrollment goal and you have a timeline, right? It's easy. I hope you're chuckling because being, as my son says, scartastic. So often in enrollment, we have a variety of goals, and they are often competing priorities. So you've got to look at the student type, the degree type, the major, the location of the student, right? As you think about what your college offers online versus in person, this is definitely something that now that I am at ODU Global that we are looking at, because we never want to cannibalize our on-campus students. So how do we strategically think about the work that we're doing in this space so that we can keep all of those things straight? When I was at the University of Pittsburgh, I was highly focused on undergraduate recruitment for about 5 years of my time there, and we were all looking at that May 1 deadline. So in terms of a timeline, we had a shared sense of what we were working toward, and that was super helpful. When I moved into the central office, we increased our support for graduate marketing. And what I found was we had a lot of various deadlines depending on the program. Research shows that online learners often choose the school that responds first. So timing really matters in what you're doing. And in that sense, I wanted to mention another key differentiator in my experience has been that at ODU Global, admissions is actually within the marketing remit. That's very different. I've seen them very closely aligned and was grateful for the experience I had at Pitt, where we worked very well together. But to see admissions as part of the marketing process, we have coaches, the enrollment coaches that work closely with our prospective students to get them to apply. That happens within the marketing remit as well. So it's really a collaborative process between marketing and admissions. A good example of this is fee waivers. We can definitely, at more decentralized institutions, have conversations about, we're going to set up a fee waiver and who is that for and how are we going to promote it. But I've been really excited by the way we can have the conversations at ODU Global, because we're all in the room having it together, and admissions is hearing what marketing is suggesting and vice versa. And so we can make those adjustments as a team versus sort of across these individual silos. I know many of you aren't squarely in the enrollment space, and I spent 5 years there as well. So you're looking at other metrics. Brand awareness, hopefully you're finding a way to measure that on the regular basis. Fundraising, website traffic. And I think one of the things is it's getting a little easier to find those metrics, but pushing them in front of your leadership and adding them to the more traditional metrics is still really hard. Leadership don't think website traffic matters, and traditional measurements don't include that. But if you think about it, your campus probably has less visitors than your website does in a year. And so we need to give that website traffic a really good look and make sure your leadership is understanding that as well. So raising the level of those goals is really important. And then finally, clearly defining the goals. The more defined your goals, the more defined the strategies. The more defined your strategies, the more you're able to say no throughout the year. And I find this to be really important, especially in roles where I've stepped into a space where perhaps there were some long-standing things, projects that we were doing, ways we were allocating money that just didn't seem reasonable because they didn't fit in the strategy. And very much in higher ed, we often hear like, well, that's the way we've always done it. But the reality is, if you have your clearly set strategy, it gives you the reason to say no. Also in higher ed, people outside of marketing really want to interject their ideas. Everyone is a marketer on campus. And so, or their cousin's sister works at an agency that does marketing. So having that set path and being able to share with people what the strategy is so that you can interject and say no. Much like running, you don't want to set that route and then take a different path and get yourself lost, right? So keeping on that strategy is really important. Now we want to talk about our people. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. And really, I call this skills because it's a good S word. But people are so important, right? Everyone knows this. Marketing and digital marketing in particular are changing so fast, and new skills are required. I put this little bit of research here. 73% of marketers say their industry changed more in the past 3 years than in the last 5 decades, which is mind-blowing. So it can be a full-time job to keep up with Google and Apple and those changes. And that's why it's really great to have a partner or a vendor helping you through that. And shout out to Alexa at Carnegie, who is really great at that. Social media is a great example of a new skill set. There are plenty of articles out there that remind us to honor our social media teams because what they carry is heavy. And if they're managing the student response during a time of discourse, in addition to sort of the regular work of the job, I just encourage you to honor those teams and do what you can for our social media folks. When I started in the Central Communications and Marketing team at the University of Pittsburgh, social media was tucked on the news side of the house. So that's truly what it was. They were sharing news articles and trying to push and be very responsive with media. And I begged and I pleaded and I pushed to move it under marketing because I really felt like we could use social media to raise brand awareness and engagement through a marketing lens. After a few years, and honestly, it took a few years, and that's something I want everyone to remember is that this takes time. Also, there was a pandemic. We established an executive level position for social media, and that position is actually split between news and marketing at Pitt. We were able to build out a small team to support it, hire student interns who do a fabulous job at branded content. And so really able to look at both that long-term branded engagement work as well as the very reactive news work that was happening as well. So really, when you're thinking about your skills, where do people live? And it's not where they used to live. And maybe there wasn't even a house for them back in the day, right? Also wanted to talk briefly about the Great Resignation and this concept that was really popular in higher ed, I would say about a year ago. We've heard less of it, I think. I don't know if people are just used to it, but really being thoughtful about what sort of flexibility you're offering if you are able to offer that. And I know that not everyone is able to do it, but some employees do want to be in the office, and for their roles, it's really helpful for them to have that campus vibe. Some employees need the flexibility to work from home sometimes. I'm actually located in Pittsburgh, but the campus for Old Dominion is in Norfolk, Virginia. I do travel down there, I'd say almost once a month, but not quite that often. Excuse me. But it works for us and our team because we are dealing with online learners. And so I'm having an experience much like our audience is having. And of the 42 people on my team, only 2 are physically located and working in and on campus. So I will say that when student arrival happened in Pittsburgh in August, I really missed those vibes. I could sort of feel it on the periphery. I could see it in my social media feed. And that was the first time from work that I was working from home and felt like, oh, this is part of the trade-off. However, I did get to campus in Norfolk later that week, and I was staying in the same hotel as many of the new students and their families. And so I was seeing those anxious conversations in the elevator and really, again, part of that vibe that I had missed while I was gone. So the point is to listen to your staff. And if you have the opportunity to make change when you can, this feels hard in higher education. we're an institution after all, and that has a certain connotation. But you can step outside and push and pull. You can think about how you might reallocate or move resources. And like I said, these things take time. So give yourself time to build that out. The next area is systems. And honestly, this is where my experiences have been fairly similar. Both institutions aiming to centralize systems to save dollars, but so often, especially for marketing data, you're not capturing the same information the same way across the university. So do you have this one source of truth? And what is the timeline for comparing enrollment goals, for example? I don't have great answers for you here, but I would encourage you to establish your systems that don't rely entirely on outside vendors. The more you can build that internal team, going back to skills and people, the more support you'll have for what you are trying to build. They'll really understand your user story. One of the things I really like at ODU Global is that we are building in-house. And so while we historically have had to rely on some outsourcing, the majority of our team and our work, whether that is coaching or Salesforce or Marketing Cloud, is being built inside our own system. So the team is loyal to the work that we do. They understand our mission and our vision, and that makes it really great when moving forward. Which isn't to say we don't need and rely on vendors, because we definitely do, whether that's to help us stand up something or troubleshoot, but being fully reliant on them can be problematic at some time. So sometimes you just have to introduce new systems or new apps, and you have to bring the college along with you. Again, that can be hard, but you can be a champion for those efforts. And I would encourage you to look to each other, look at other schools that have done this successfully, particularly if you're looking at a particular system. Oftentimes, higher ed likes to look at each other for sources of truth, I guess I would say. And so you have friends out there that are going through what you're going through, and I'll talk about connections at the end. Budgets. Really, I think the big question here is, does marketing matter at your institution? Is it being funded? Traditional higher education budgets weren't built with marketing in mind. So, looking back at your strategy, looking back at those goals, how you are measuring and how you are reporting those dollars is really important. And this is something that I think we will all continue to sort of fight for, no matter what your role is or what institution is, to raise the value of marketing and to get those dollars aligned. And most likely that requires some reallocation of dollars, but you can also find the measurements and things that prove that the work you're doing is worth it. One idea from Pitt that I hope to bring to ODU Global in the next year is this central pot of dollars that we use to support very decentralized marketing. So we built a graduate marketing team at the University of Pittsburgh, and Ink Young and Kelly Pinzone, who are on the team and are still there today, really working as consultants with our individual departments at the graduate level. Graduate education at Pitt is very decentralized. And the programs are learning that they can't continue to rely on the work that has been done in the past, right? Applications don't just come to the door anymore at the numbers that they need. So they're now starting to realize they need help, but they frankly don't have the resources to do that. So it's not a ton of money that we had, but we did have this pot of money, and we were able to offer it up as really sort of a grant to the departments to offer them to get started in these spaces. So that might look like digital advertising, and I would say 100% of the time I needed a partner to help them through that, get that set up and running. Video production, it even looked like redoing an exhibit to really ensure that we were reflecting the diversity of the institution when they were traveling and on the road for recruiting. So I share that because those schools maybe didn't have money, or they only had a little bit of money. Sometimes it was a match. Sometimes it was a full fund, depending on what it was. Always it was connected with the vice provost for graduate studies, because she was driving the strategy for the university. So thinking back to those strategy goals, she knew which areas were really needed the enrollment and had the opportunity for growth. And so that's where our funding went. So these weren't arbitrary decisions. It's really important for our universities to make choices about what we're going to promote and find those niches that we are unique to serving, and then funding those as needed. So the essentials we just discussed were just that. I view them as essentials. These are areas that I write plans for, and then I go back and revisit and consistently try to negotiate, always remembering that I can say no to things along the way if it was done right. The latest piece to enter the game is artificial intelligence. And frankly, this addresses what the learners are looking for, right? They want personalization, they want speed, they want technology, and AI is able to help us do all of those things. If you haven't waded into this space yet, you might want to think about doing that soon. It feels big and scary, but the reality is you're probably already using it in your personal life and may not even realize it at the time. I want to touch on what some other schools are doing in AI, but first I wanted to remind you about our learners, because Gen Z and Gen Y is the audiences we're looking at, and Gen Alpha is coming, and there's presentations about that in the future. But 40% of Gen Z actually freely give out their personal data to get access to that discount code, right? And I am guilty of this as well, right? Here's my email address for 10% off a product. And then in terms of positivity, 65% of Gen Z and 73% of Gen Y say that they have positive feelings about AI. So AI, while maybe scary and has some ethical implications and definitely security concerns, still has a very positive backing from our audiences. So I wanted to walk through some areas where AI is already happening and give you some things to think about in your own institutions. At the admissions level, we're already seeing Georgia Tech using AI for the first review of application. They're experimenting with this concept, trying to reduce the need for humans to review every application. So last year, Georgia Tech had, I think, 52,000 plus applications, and their acceptance rate is 16%. So if you think about that from a staffing point of view, really ensuring that they don't need someone to look at every application, but they can do sort of an early filter using AI and push it to the next level. Website personalization is another great example in admissions. This is when website content adapts to the user based on the content that they're looking at on the site. And multiple agencies are offering this functionality, including Carnegie through Carnegie Clarity. So for example, if a user is reviewing information targeted at military audiences, the next time that person returns to the site, there will be military information on the homepage for them. AI has also been used in advising and retention, particularly for degree planning. There's a tool called Stellic that was created by Carnegie Mellon University students, in fact, and it reimagines degree planning by using data and very customized support, and it actually helps not only the student, but the advisor to really react in real time as part of degree planning. Nova Southeastern University is adopting AI-powered solutions to help identify students at risk of stopping out. So I don't know how familiar you are with AI, but it can use a lot of data to make predictions, and Nova can more easily target those students who may be at risk of leaving. I just want to caveat this with, if you are using this sort of predictive AI, you've really got to be careful about being equitable across your students. So if you base it entirely on historical data, the result is going to be very similar and may just exacerbate the disparities that already exist. So very powerful, definitely worth testing and trying out, but just being thoughtful as we're using it. In student affairs, chatbots, in retail chatbot, I mean, in almost everything, right? Chatbots. We're seeing, big and small institutions using chatbots on their site. At some of the larger institutions, Arizona State, Georgia State, Ohio State, Penn State, for example, these chatbots have fun names like Pounce or BuckeyeBot or Sunny. And for Arizona, Arizona State, the Hey Sunny website explains that all of this information is reviewed by a human, right? So the machine, while maybe answering, is still relying on the human to build that knowledge base and ensure that the information it is providing is accurate. So lots of work happening and growth happening in that area. And then finally, communications. If you are not or have not yet used communications, used AI to generate communications, you are really missing out on a big way to save some time. First drafts are incredible in AI, and I would encourage you for the next bit of project you have on your plate, I'll talk more about how you can use it, but it's definitely a place to use it for first drafts. And I would encourage you to be careful. There are universities that have used ChatGPT to produce messaging and didn't really use the human empathy side and suffered because of it. So just caution is helpful, but don't let fear stop you from trying out AI. So swinging back to the 4 areas that I talked about, just wanted to give you some examples of where IA can be really useful in those 4 areas. The reality is that these are all linked, truly, right? Like if you are able to save time in your strategy and connect the systems with AI, if you're able to build out your team with AI, you're going to save money with AI, right? So as I mentioned, first drafts, drafting campaign concepts, maybe you have the generation of an idea, but you need to sort of build out that full plan. I mentioned here skills on the people side. I've been incredibly grateful, especially as I'm building out the team at ODU Global, to have help in writing and drafting job descriptions, in writing and drafting annual reviews. Again, first drafts definitely need some eyes on them. If you want to test out email subject lines through your platforms, dropping in the content of the email and then asking for 5 subject lines. I've used it to draft entire conference presentation titles. And to be honest with you, some of the images you see here today were created with Duet AI in Google Slides. So lots of opportunities. And just, I don't think that AI replaces people, but it does elevate people. And I think that's worth thinking about and noting, really elevating people in their positions is going to increase job satisfaction. So if we can take the lift of some of the more mundane tasks, if we can take the fret of the first draft off someone's plate, we can get where we need to be a little bit faster. And again, we're all really interested in the speed. So we've narrowed down, our learners' needs. We've talked about the 4 essentials, and we're in this race, right? We have the tools, we're prepared, we go off course sometimes, we say no, and we're really, ahead of the pack. And so I wanted to just close here on these connections. The industry is changing really quickly, and the connections we have at conferences like this are really important. So just encouraging you to seek out the information at conferences. Again, when you're thinking about systems in particular, finding people who use the same system and having discussions with them, connecting people at your university, maybe in IT, with their university, maybe in IT, so you're not in the middle of that conversation. And the reality is you're here today, you're already ahead of the pack. I did put a couple of conferences in there and companies that I particularly love to work with. AMA has a higher education symposium every November. We'll be in Chicago next month. Really excited to be part of that effort and to see more than 1,000 people joining us in person there. The Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, and I believe Terry was speaking with the group as well, but incredible opportunities that are truly year-round, and a resource of library resources that you can access at any time, frankly. And then I mentioned Carnegie because they have some other great conferences as well, including their January conference that I have attended multiple times in the past. All of these opportunities, I always walk away with new connections. Typically, they're the ones I meet at, some sort of meal, maybe over the lunch table, someone I've never met before. And I'd love to dive in on the conversation about the 4 things that we just talked about. So how are you organized? What is the goal? Where are you struggling in any of these spaces? And just sort of commiserate over what we are all facing in higher education marketing, but we all do this because we love, what we do. So I also threw in some remote work tips. This is just sort of a little add-on because it is one of the biggest differences between the 2 institutions, Pitt and Old Dominion. I am now working remote, as I mentioned, and while I visit campus, my audience is online, my team is mostly online, and just some tips for you. If you are working remote or if you are hybrid, really finding ways, frankly, to disconnect and frankly, to focus. These can be really hard things to do, whether you're in the office or remote. We have Teams, we have text, we have, all these things that are trying to help us move faster, and sometimes they are just distractions. So really worth thinking about your people and your skills in this space. So with that, just wanted to say thank you for having me here today, and I hope there are some questions in the chat I have my email and my LinkedIn and would love to connect with you also in person at an upcoming conference.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kate, for that awesome presentation. I feel like there was so much kind of actionable next steps that can be taken, as well as big picture themes, which is always really helpful when you can combine those in one session. So really, really appreciate that. Couple of questions, and I do welcome anybody that is here listening. If you want to continue to throw questions in the chat, we do have some time, so happy to answer those if any came up last minute. But you did talk a little bit about setting boundaries and really thinking about the actions your team takes and making sure that aligns with the strategy, being really thoughtful about that. Do you have any kind of tips and tricks for marketers that are starting to do this for the first time and really having to have those difficult conversations of, well, the former person wore these many hats. Now we're really trying to be intentional. Any tips there?
Yeah, well, I think the way you framed it, Jamie, is one of the best ways to do that. It is often that exact conversation. And I would start with small wins, right? So there are definitely some ways that you can, come into an organization and maybe see something that feels so obvious to you, but is not so obvious to the team that's there or the faculty or the leadership that's there, because this is just how it has been for so long. And so being careful not to point it out with any sort of, you don't like a know-it-all attitude, but just sort of gently pointing it out while also providing a new solution. I think if you're only pointing out what needs to be changed without a really maybe innovative or new way to change it, and to be honest, some of the changes, the best changes, especially at Pitt, I'm new to ODU, so we're still doing a lot of this work. And I'm still being real careful about not taking down anything that the previous team has done, because they have done quite a bit of work. But for the University of Pittsburgh, it was often letting the teams come up with those ideas. I'll give a really, really, really small example, which is when I took over on-campus programs at the University of Pittsburgh. For whatever reason, they used to put signage on these garbage cans. And I think that the idea was to raise the height of the sign so that in a crowd, you could see the signage. But when it was not crowded, all I could see were these garbage cans. And so it was like, just sort of like, hey, curious about why we do it this way. And then, oh, we could probably buy these instead, and problem solved, right? Like this doesn't feel like a big thing, except to the person that ran that area before, that was a big deal. Don't touch the garbage cans, right? So that is just a small minor thing. And sometimes you can start with that little thing, like, hey, what if we just did this, and build the trust of your team over time to continue to do that. So just be patient. It just takes time.
That's awesome. Such a good example. And I love the concept of small wins, because I think we get wrapped up in big picture changes and forget that these small wins build up into building the reputation and taking those baby steps. So I appreciate that one. I also had a question for you so you've transitioned to a very different type of institution, different type of audience. You're building a new team. Have you been able to identify any positions that maybe you didn't have when we're thinking about skills and people at Pitt that you're now building at ODU that are a different way of thinking or a different type of skill set? I know you had mentioned kind of the evolution of social, et cetera. Anything that kind of comes to mind that's new and different in terms of positions?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I definitely, and I think everyone does, I definitely bring with me the experiences that I had in the teams I was growing at the University of Pittsburgh. But because we are so different, it is going to look different at Old Dominion. And I try really hard not to talk too much about my previous institution, right? When I'm doing any sort of planning with the team. The social piece is really interesting, because where I am situated within digital learning at ODU Global, I don't need this huge social team. And it's really clear, because we don't thankfully manage the news side of things. I can have a social media manager fully focused on just the work that we do. So that will be just a one-person team, very different from what I was building out at Pitt. I think the other positions are, what is different for me is building out this coaching on the admissions side, and also thinking more about tiered and laddered opportunities. I think just given the resource and the the focus on doubling enrollment in 5 years, there's a recognition that we need to build out this tiered team. We're going to bring people in at a particular level. We want them to stay with us for this journey. So how do we sort of level up and create positions? And I didn't have the opportunity or even really think about that at Pitt because we were resource constrained in that space. But here it's a little more open. And so I'm excited to bring people in and help them grow up sort of through our system.
That makes so much sense. I appreciate that example. We have another question that came in here too. What do you see as the biggest opportunity in marketing online programs right now, or potential opportunities you see on the horizon?
Oh, there's so many things. I think there are so many moving things in this space. I think helping students identify, they are so sort of lasered in on cost and program that what potentially gets lost in the space is the branding aspect of it. And I'm really interested to see how we can bring that to helping students make decisions. When you're working with the on-campus students, there's more of an opportunity for sort of this, I hate to use the word fit, but to help them feel what that feels like. And right now in the online space, that really isn't the case, right? They're, no matter where they are getting their education from, they're still sitting, whether it's at home or at work or whatever the situation is. So I'm really interested in exploring, this will take time, but really interested in exploring like how we bring those brand experiences to life on the online side. I don't see too much of that happening yet. And I truly think to think about like long-term opportunities. I have a 10-year-old son. And I'm not just saying this because I'm at an online institution. I don't know that he'll end up at sort of a traditional 4-year college by the time he's going to school in 8 years. And I'm super curious to see how students can personalize their experience, start somewhere, move around within a system, and how higher ed is supporting that movement versus trying to keep people in sort of one bucket. That's going to take a whole lot of movement, but I feel like it's also a generation of students who want that opportunity. So both very big picture things, but that's why I love to be joining this space because there is, who knows, it's all happening so fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of redefinition happening with the online community. So love that answer so much. So I think those were all of our questions. Of course, if anyone has questions after you see Kate's contact information here, you can also reach out to us. We're happy to get answers for you. But I have a couple of kind of housekeeping notes for you all. I really want to thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, Kate, for this session. So valuable in terms of the content and just the engagement that our group is experiencing. We do have our next session coming up here at 2 o'clock. And that session is the NAGAT Grad Enrollment Management Landscape and NAGAT discussion panel. So very exciting for those of you that are thinking about grad programs. That's coming up here at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can also check the agenda in the Whova app if you want to see the other sessions that are happening and how to attend all of those sessions. They're all located in there. And again, if you have any issues with technical issues or questions, you can reach out to us at marketing@carnegiehighered.com or message us through the Whova app. But thank you all so much. That's all we have for you today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and the rest of the sessions.